Stop the count. The Brumbies and Waratahs are atop the Super Rugby ladder after round one, and humble pie is being served cold in the nation's north and west. Reds fans are shattered. The Force are in tatters after derby defeats, and I should probably never tip again. Max Jorgensen is getting us hot. Charlie Cale's got us hot. Merrill Fire Lungy is incredible. The Highlanders are my new favourite team, and Tupai Vai might be Superman. Welcome back to the Scrumbags Rugby podcast.
Hearing from the crowds that you're tough as woodpecker.
Apologising for kicking a drop goal.
Jorgensen, Max Jorgensen, no, he didn't! Oh my goodness me! Rush there, run! He's got the record! Tom Wright, just too good! This is ecstasy for Wallabies fans!
Yes, it's around midday on the 15th of February. Happy belated Valentine's Day to the lovers out there. And my co-host Mitch Foster is a very, very happy man sporting the Tahs hat. Why wouldn't you? After a massive weekend. How are you, mate?
I'm very... Oh, Lachie, I'm just getting a call. I might just put this in here. Oh, is it working? Can you hear it? Oh, it's not working.
It's not me crying on Friday night, is it?
No, it's not. It's the Waratahs team song, the victory song from the New South Wales Waratahs. First time holding the Bob Templeton Cup since 2023. And that was just a little bit of audio that for some reason wasn't working. That was going to be them singing their team song in the change room on Friday evening. So, yeah, very, very happy Waratahs fan right here.
As you should be, because it wasn't just being there for the win. Now, you were there in the press box, you had the full experience, and it's something that we're actually giving straight to our listeners.
That's right, yeah. So Friday night we were lucky enough, well, I was lucky enough to be granted access to the media box at Allianz Stadium for that one. And got to be in there for that, got to sort of rub shoulders with a few of the other Sydney journos and attend the post-match press conferences and then a few interviews with some players as well. So make sure that you're subscribed to our Patreon because we've got the interview now, we put as soon as we can, get the press conferences up and on that content for you to listen straight away. And then we've got an interview currently up with Charlie Gamble, and there is one coming up later this afternoon. By the time this comes out, you should have access to it, but with an interview with Miles Matasero. So the first time he's faced media since that scuffle in Waratahs pre-season training. So it's a pretty interesting interview, so make sure that you're subscribed so you can get access to that.
How does he box? Is he right-handed or is he southpaw?
You could sort of tell that some of the other journos were, playing it a bit nice and easy, and it took him a good hour or so from when we did the press conferences to come out, and he kept saying the Waratahs media guy kept saying, "Oh, he's in the showers," and so he wasn't pushing him too hard to come out. But we all waited. We know this was going to be an exclusive that we wanted to get his thoughts on things, and you can't sort of hurry him up too much because you don't want to shape up against him from what he can do. But no, very interesting interview. Some insight into what that event was and how he's gone through that sort of rehab process and getting over it and what he's doing and facing next, and then how he's sort of channeling his aggression throughout this season and making sure that those types of things don't happen again.
Well, and that's the kind of stuff that you get on Scrumbags Extra Time. So please hop over to Patreon. We're going to be locking that paywall as of today. So please make sure you get in, support a bit of independent content, and get the news that you don't get anywhere else right here on Scrumbags. Just a quick look as well. Mitch has been working hard, setting up our TikTok as well. So please, if you're on TikTok, jump across, have a peek at what's going on over there on Scrumbags. We've also got Super Rugby Fantasy, Mitch, which has been going massively. We've got over 700 people in our league, currently leading the rugby column. Notorious over on Instagram, the rugby column. They're up on 726 points. Wilso and the Aura Farmer are rounding out our top three. And we've got a tipping comp over at Super Brew. It's pretty small, but it's starting to pick up. Shout out to TJ Humpenstuff, who's leading the tipping over there. What a name. And I think we should just get straight into the round one scores. What do you reckon?
Yeah, let's get through it. I know as a Waratahs fan, I'm keen to talk all things New South Wales Waratahs this season and get that the dub over Queensland. So we'll get to that in due time, but there were other scores to go through. So I'll run through the scores and then we might just have a quick chat around what we thought from some of the New Zealand games before we do a deep dive into the two Aussie derbies. So kicking things off on Friday night, we had the Highlanders hosting the Crusaders. This is probably the upset of the round, 25-23 to the Highlanders here. Very tight game, and it came down to a kick pretty much on full time for the Highlanders to get the win there. But great to see them beat the Crusaders. It's always exciting time when anyone can beat the Crusaders in Super Rugby. We then went to Sydney, where the Waratahs absolutely pants the Queensland Reds 36-12. Then Saturday afternoon, we were over in Lautoka for the Fijian and Drua hosting Moana Pacifica, the Battle of the Pacific. 40-26 was the score here to Moana Pacifica, which, I mean, I must admit, I didn't tip that way, so I was a bit surprised to see that result, but a masterclass in back row rugby from Miracle Whaialagi there. And then we went to Eden Park to see the Blues hosting the Chiefs. This, again, was another tight contest, came right down to the wire, 19-15. Final score on this one to the Chiefs, before we went to Perth to finish off round one with the Brumbies absolutely showing how to play rugby in 35-degree weather, 56-24 to the Brumbies in that one across the over the Western Force.
Yeah, it was a crazy opening round, wasn't it, Mitch? I guess the main thing, if we're going quickly through these games overall, was just how shocked everyone was seeing the Highlanders get up and do it. And they played well, right? Like Caleb Tangi-Tau's a freaky scores the opening try. Tavanawai and Jonah Lowe in the centres were really good, set up a bunch of assists. But I thought the Crusaders had it late. They were doing all the right things. They brought on 6 All Blacks off the bench. Will Jordan scores, but Cam Miller, the canasters on that guy to step up from 49 metres out and do it late. I think you're right. A win over the Crusaders is celebrated by everyone in the competition.
And you could really see what it meant to the Highlanders as soon as there was full time called, they shot to the press or the coach's box and they were all hugging and high fiving, but you could definitely see that there was some emotion in that one. So always good to see that. The Crusaders lose a game, and if you're going to do it, it's probably the earlier rounds of the Super Rugby season. So hats off to the Highlanders. They've shown up and they've done well, and they've got the victory first round.
It's certainly better than the other Kiwi derby that we saw. The Blues Chiefs was real scrappy. Scoreless opening 30. It started to pick up very late after a couple of tries. It was a brilliant finish from Cortez Radimer, ran onto a great semi-penny finale line break, scooted away for the sealing try in the 75th minute. But there was a really interesting try that I know you wanted to touch on, Mitch, here. Tupou Vai playing a bit of Clark Kent, sailing over the top of a ruck. And there was a similar incident in the Tahs game as well that you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a misconception or a misunderstanding in world rugby on how to actually adjudicate this area of the game. And if you haven't seen either of these instances, what we're talking about, in the opening try for the Chiefs, Tupou Vai takes the ball from the back of a ruck and he Superman dives over 3 of the Blues defenders and scores a try. Now, it's awarded straight away. There's no thought to take it off, to go to TMO, to anything. Referee's arm goes up, it's awarded. In the Waratahs game, Miles Matasero does something pretty similar. He dives over 3 players. His dive looks more of like an up and over, like a high jump dive, as opposed to Tupou Vai's sort of Superman over to the space behind the ruck. But Paul Williams immediately blows it up. He was playing advantage at that point, so he comes back to that and says, look, you can't dive over players to score a try. And I know in the comms box, Shawnee highlighted that try stood in the second test against the Lions last year, and that very similar circumstances happened there, and in 2 different outcomes. And we're seeing it in the opening round of Super Rugby this year. How do you adjudicate this? Is this actually a try or is this not a try? Because I was okay, I must admit, as a Waratahs fan, I was actually okay with Paul Williams' reasoning behind taking that try off. But when you see the result from the Highlanders, it's the Chiefs, Tupou Vai's try, it's pretty chalk. It's exactly the same. That he's diving over players to score the try. The fans and the arguments I've seen online come down to, is he diving to avoid players tackling him, or is he diving to score the try? How do you differentiate the two?
I have no idea, to be honest, because for me, those 3 tries, if you include the Dan Sheehan one from the Lions series, they have to be adjudicated the same way, and right now they're not. I think that from a safety perspective, if you are using the ruck as a hurdle and an obstacle that you can jump over, then it's almost obstruction, because you have players in front of you that are protecting space for you to go through. But if you dive in the act of scoring a try, you can dive through contact and protect the ball. I think there needs to be some nuance around it. So if it's close to the ruck and you have someone who's picking and going over the top of a ruck and they're jumping over players, I think that's actually dangerous play. And that's not me saying that that's what the rules are. That's my personal take, is that you're launching yourself aerially over the top of a ruck, you know that people can't get to you. Therefore, I would say that's a professional foul, or that's poor sportsmanship, I think, because you're avoiding tacklers and not in a way that is fair or equitable to defend.
Legal.
Otherwise you'll start having people just try and jump over the ruck, and you'll have to set a defender behind the ruck out of play to stop that happening. It just gets messy. So I think it's easier if they're always ruled no try. But you can't deny that they look spectacular. So part of me, the fan experience, wants to say, go for it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think if you're diving to avoid a tackle or to score a try, regardless of how you do it, if you dive over anyone, it's illegal. It's too hard as the defending player to actually legally stop you. And so I know there's some talk around in this one. The commentary team was talking around how Miles's one, he sort of dived around the ruck. He didn't dive over it. He sort of went from an angle. Tupo Vaya also sort of picked the ball up and dived over the try line, not over the ruck, but by the side of the ruck. But he still went over the top of three players who were literally on their ground, Blues defenders who were on their ground, trying to stop a pick and drive. So it's a pretty difficult area and a grey area that World Rugby need to sort out, because this game ultimately, like it was, this try happened in the first 20 minutes, I think, for the the Chiefs, but they went on to win a really tight game from it, 5 points, 7 points ultimately on the line there. That's taken off. The Blues win that. So there's going to be some area, or we just need to figure out in terms of competition moving forward. I know World Rugby is a different thing, and you see different things happening in the north to the south, and Test Rugby to Super Rugby and all that type of stuff. But for mine, I think we need consistency within the competition, and we can't have two different situations happening in the opening round of the competition being ruled differently, where they're pretty much the same thing happening. So, but I think we've spoken enough around that. We'll move on to some of the other games that happened across the weekend. Let's talk about Fiji and Drua hosting Moana Pacifica. That one was pretty spicy.
I think it always is, Battle of the Pacific. And as you mentioned off the top, like Miracle Whailangi, it was his show. So much of the chat around Moana this year has been, what are they going to do without Ardie? Well, Miracle Whailangi runs in a hat trick in the first half and just says, no, I think we're going to be okay. Like, we're going to be fine. They did a great job. They took the crowd
Ardie
out
who?
of it early. But they took the crowd out. Like, it's in Lautoka, where they were on a 9-game hot streak, the Drua, and 3 tries in the opening 16 minutes. They took the crowd out. So, yes, Fiji came back. It was sort of 33-26 with about 10 to play, but the Drua just didn't execute late. We've seen them pull off so many clutch wins, but I think it was that early pressure from Moana and of Miracle Whailangi that did it for them. It was a big upset for me, because I thought for all love and money the Drua at Churchill Park were a goer.
Yeah, and what we've seen and we've spoken about in our previews in the off-season, like you look at the amount of talent that Moana Pacifica lost in that off-season, like they lost something like 16 of their team from last year. And that's a massive amount of... It's a completely new side that you're putting up this week. So I was expecting a similar performance to what we saw in the Western Force game, which we'll get to shortly. But just a team that was very new combinations, didn't look like they knew what they were doing or how to play together. But credit to Moana Pacifica, that was not what happened on the field. And they came out and they were the rightful victors in this one. I think what is going to be an interesting element that I don't know if we've, like a lot of coaching teams, or we haven't heard a lot of people speak about, is these opening rounds of the competition. The weather is a factor that teams just aren't preparing for. We'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to that second game, the Force and the Brumbies. But both of these fixtures were played in sort of 35, 36 degree weather in the middle of the day or late in the evening. And you could definitely tell that the heat was a factor that sapped one team more than the other in both of these fixtures. And you don't really get that later in the competition. It's always the early February games or the late January ones, we go back a few years, where you are kicking off in 35, 36, 37 degree weather. And you have to put all these new measures in place to sort of manage the heat. And some players just didn't know how to adapt to that.
Oh, I think if anyone's going to thrive, it's going to be the Drew and Moana as well. It looked like Fiji were going to come home with a wet sail. They pushed back sort of mid 60-minute mark, scored a couple of tries, but yeah, enough gas in the tank. I think it was probably more prevalent in that Perth game that we'll touch on. But yeah, having a drinks break too. We saw it at Next Gen as well. Like they are really dialing down on making sure the players are fit and firing. And I know I sure as hell wouldn't be running around there at 35 degrees.
No chance. I wouldn't even be sitting in the stands, to be honest. That's arduous stuff. But Lachie, I'm keen to get your thoughts on just a few quick things before we dive into the two Aussie derbies. We saw some new law variations be implemented in Super Rugby this year. We forgot to mention it last week on the pod, so to our fans, we apologise about that. But some of the law variations, did you notice anything in this opening round? Any changes? Any differences from the way that things were adjudicated that either sped up the game, had a positive or a negative impact?
Games were faster. Definitely the Kiwi game. I think it was the first game, Highlanders Crusaders, with Gussie Gardner in charge. He was on them, red hot the whole time, saying, let's play, let's move it on, let's pick up the pace. And they were knackered too. So I think that's why we're seeing more tries late in the game now as well, because the big boys are tired. In particular, there's more space, there's more fatigue on the field. And that's what we want to see. I think as fans, you want to know that the game's always in jeopardy. And like across the board, think about firstly in the Aussie games, how many tries were scored late, but also across the whole round one. I think that's final 20 minutes. There were so many tries stacked on. And I think it's because the pace is being kept in the game now. And I love to see that, South Africans across the world tremble at the thought of not drinks breaks every 5 minutes. But I think it's a massive deal for what we've seen in Super Rugby. We wanted a fast, entertaining product. And I think especially in that game, it really set the tone. What about you?
There's the one area that I'm a little bit hesitant on is the scrum. And with some of the changes to the LVs this year, so the law variations they've brought in. So one of them is that you can take a quick tap within a metre either side or behind the mark. So we're not coming back and stopping play. I think that's a good one. And there's also a few other variations brought in around, short arms for accidental offside. And we saw that a few times across both of the Aussie games particularly. One thing, though, I think we're probably pushing a little bit too far is we're pushing too far into the idea of trying to speed the game up so fast that we're making the scrum, or we're underpowering or undervaluing the value of the scrum in our game. And one of the things I noticed early, particularly in that Waratahs game, was the first 2 or 3 scrums just resulted in a short arm really quickly. And it was because both teams were too, like the referee was saying that they weren't stable at the breakdown or at the impact. And look, I kind of get that. Like, we want to play rugby, but we also don't want to result in just every time we come to a scrum, we just get a free kick because teams aren't, packing quick enough or whatever. The scrums were packing a lot faster. I did notice that in years gone past, had come to a scrum and you go, okay, I'll just check Instagram or my TikTok now and see what's going on. And in 3 minutes, we might get the ball out of the back. But as soon as the mark's set, players are quickly in there and trying to do that. And I don't mind that as an idea. But what we're starting to see from that, though, is that scrums aren't actually being completed. And it's short arms are being given for little things like instability. We're not actually seeing a scrum completed for scrum's sake. And so I'm cautious moving forward that we don't want to remove scrums completely from the game, because that's not going to serve the Wallabies or the All Blacks or the Pacific Island teams when we get to international rugby, because in that instance, we know that the scrum is an important thing. South African rugby thrives on it. We don't want to have a Wallabies team or an All Blacks team who hasn't scrummed properly for 6 months, because in Super Rugby, we just get the ball in, okay, short arm, let's just play. And then, when we don't know how to scrum properly, we get absolutely pants that area of the game. So one area that I'm just a little bit conscious of, that I actually want to see a good scrum battle. And I don't think we saw that in any of the games this weekend, really. It wasn't really an idea of one team getting dominant over the other. It was more about who could play the way the referee was interpreting the scrum best to get a full arm.
Yeah, and I think there'll be teething issues as well, but I don't think I can say it better than you did, Mitch. We want to make sure that our scrum is top quality at test level. Are these laws the best way to achieve that? I'm not sure that they are, but Super Rugby is kind of its own product too, so we'll have to keep a close eye on over the next few weeks.
And it is also just a safety issue as well. Like, we don't want to speed the scrum up so fast that we go back to the old school scrums where you used to see, if you scroll back on Stan Sports and look at some of those, some of those scrums from like the early 1990s or whatever, and they're literally just, someone drops the ball, two guys just run at each other, hit the scrum. Like, it's dangerous. There's going to be broken necks all over the place. So it is one area we need to be conscious of, player welfare, that we're not speeding the players up too much so that with that fatigue that's eating into the game, they're not hurting themselves at the contact either.
I completely agree. And look, if we're going to talk welfare, maybe we shouldn't talk about the Reds Tahs game, because I'm already freaking out at the thought of even reviewing it. It's brutal. It's brutal. We're going to get straight into it. Tahs 36 defeated the Reds 12. It felt like a lot bigger margin as a Reds fan too, like 17-12 at halftime, flattered Queensland. And really, from the 54th minute mark, when Teddy Wilson gets a turnover, kicks it downfield, leads to the Kylea try, it was game, set, match after an hour. I did not expect it to be that comprehensive, Mitch Foster.
I did. I was calling for a 70 point, and so the fact that it was only 20 something points between them is a little bit upsetting as a Waratahs fan. Look, how hard do I go on this, Lachie? Like, I don't want to go too hard. I don't want to absolutely smash you. I want you back next week. You know, we've got a rematch in round 4, so we can't get too far ahead of ourselves. But I think one of the things as a Waratahs fan, the preseason form has come into the season, which is great, and that's one of the things that we've spoken about before. You can trial as well as you want in the preseason, but as soon as you get into round 1, you usually see clunky performances. I'm not saying this wasn't a clunky performance by the Waratahs, but they were clinical in the times that they got into the Reds 22. They played in the right areas of the field and just unleashed some absolute superb rugby from their outside backs. Max Jorgensen in particular, so good. I think one thing that the Reds will be ruining is, and the Waratahs particularly will be fixing up next week, is they scored all their points pretty much from Waratahs' mistakes. They didn't really create anything. The 2 tries that they managed to score, one was from a poor exit from the Waratahs, who then just in that sort of maul huddle, when the player goes up and brings it down from kickoff, they just turned it over. Joe Brow steals it, and then they spread it wide and score in the corner. And the other one, which was a really weird kind of intercept, kick through, players all out of position, looked like it was going dead. Charlie Gamble's just meandering back, and Tim Ryan picks it up and scores. So the Reds didn't, for mine, create a whole lot of attacking flair or attacking anything in this game, and they just pouched on those 2 opportunities.
I agree. I think, like we said, the Reds were probably lucky to be 17-12. That was such a weird interplay leading up to Tim Ryan's try. Like, Jorgo sort of intercepts it on the back foot. He was covering a lot of space on that left wing and gets it back up to halfway, and then Joe Bryle with almost an AFL pinpoint kick. It felt strange, and then the other one just felt lucky, right? Like, just before halftime, Bryle's the one that gets over in the corner after McGrath spins out. It just felt like it was the Tahs switching off, and that's why I was so concerned looking at halftime and going, wow, like the Reds are very fortunate probably to be up 12. The physicality is something that I would love to touch on, and you'd be so stoked, because Clem Halaholo, Miles Adamasero, Liafi Talataina when he came on, Isaac Kylea, all these boys for the Tahs created so much go forward, and it felt like, even though the concern around the Reds was, who's our playmaker? Look at our injuries out in the backs. They did not have a big ball carry that could consistently get them over the gain line. Salako Loto was pretty well handled, even though he's a tough customer. And then everything else, the Tahs swamped them in defence and then got so much front foot ball. It felt like momentum was always with the Waratahs, and they looked much more dangerous.
I think one of the thoughts I had whilst watching, particularly late in the second half, was the injuries really did hurt the Reds coming into this game, and not having Tom Liner or Carter Gordon. Like, Harry McLaughlin-Phillips has been there in the last few seasons for the Reds, but Louis Wertron gets his run-on debut this week, and not having Tate McDermott there, it's pretty telling for them that they didn't really, both of those guys together, I don't even know how many minutes they've actually played of Super Rugby together. Probably none. Lockie's given me the fat 0. So this is the first time, and Les Kiss and his team is forced into that through the players that are unavailable through injury. But they didn't look like they were steering the ship around. And when you start to talk about how we were expecting the players like Salakai Loto, Joe Bryle, Sarah Uru, when he got on to actually step up and deliver that game-busting performance, game line-breaking runs, they weren't given the opportunity from the attacking players either. So they just looked kind of rudderless at times, like they didn't really know what to do. There was a few times, particularly late in the second half, where they get the ball and they look up and they didn't know what was going on, so they sort of dogleg back inside and then they end up getting tackled by themselves. And it was just a bit of a mess.
Yeah, you're right. No game drivers there. And McLaughlin Phillips tried, but I think options like short kicking game, chip and chase, they're low percentage players. You really need someone who was going to be more structured. And I think McLaughlin Phillips can play that game. Naturally, he likes to run more as a 10, but that seemed uncharacteristic. And I think you're right in suggesting that the lack of combination with Wirtshon played a huge factor. So I think it's a matter of very quickly trying to get your McDermott, your Kalani Thomases back into the mix, because that's 2 Wallaby halfbacks, 2 Wallaby fly halves in Gordon and Liner out of it too. So you can see why. But I don't think that excuses other parts of the Reds game, particularly ruck time too. Like I talked about physicality, sort of attack and defence, but the breakdown was an area that the Tahs flooded. Like Charlie Gamble had a field day. Ethan Dobbins was great on ball too. And when they weren't going for the pilfer, they were putting heaps of pressure through the ruck and onto Wirtshon. So it never gave the Reds clean ball. So not only were they going backwards, getting hit physically, but they never had clean ball to work with. And you saw so many errors forced. Like when Teddy Wilson does sort of find that turnover and kick ahead, it was a result of so much pressure that was pumping through the middle. So I've got to tip my hat to the Tahs in that regard. It was massive from them. And then we get to the big one, Max Jorgensen. What a game from the $1 million baby.
Oh, how good was Max Jorgensen in this game? Like, we spoke about it in the preseason, in the lead-up, in the preview of this game, that Max Jorgensen's good for a try or two from nothing. And this week, he delivers perfectly. The 2 tries that he scores, that first one was just incredible. To go, 65-odd metres, to get around Jock Campbell, Louis Wirtshon. It looked like men against boys stuff there with him, with ball in hand. That second try that Charlie Gamble, sets up and pops onto the inside, he just has that ability to know where to be at the right time and to finish things off. Like the Waratahs had no right to score that try. And without a player like Maxi Jorgensen reading that play so well, I reckon 9 times out of 10 in Super Rugby, the ball stays with Charlie Gamble in that breakdown and they end up turning it over in the corner. Max Jorgensen's the type of player that shows up right at the right time and finishes it off just superbly.
It was Johnny on the spot. Like, he hits it at pace too. No one could lay a finger on him. The fact for his first try that Jock Campbell did not even touch him. 20 metres of space, fakes to go left, bang off the left to go right, and just, it was beautiful stuff. Like, it reminds me of kids lining each other up at lunchtime one-on-one, and the ooh from the crowd that goes up as you get left for dead. Like, it was just, It was awesome to see. And it's funny, we've sort of posed the question, when his contract stuff came out, 5 years, big money, we've got so many outside backs, do we need Jorgensen? Yes, this is exactly why you're on the money. And not only that, but he got that intercept try saver. He pulled off 50-22 at a really important time as well, late in the game, to really twist the knife. So he's on a one-trick pony, Jorgo. He was excellent. Who else stood tall for the Tahs for you? Because for me, not one person of the Reds gets a mention.
Not even one. Jeez, that's a tough night. I'll give a tip to Fraser McWright. I thought at one point in the second half, I put on our group chat that there was one Queensland Reds player playing tonight, and it was Fraser McWright. Like, he still was pretty strong at the breakdown, still getting a few turnovers, and definitely put the Reds on his back a few times and kept them in the game there with those 2 tries. He was pretty instrumental in both of those plays. So I'll give a shout out to him. One thing, I guess, and we'll get back to them in a little bit more, that it goes to show, though, with his injuries, without the likes of Harry Wilson and Tate McDermott, that this Reds team just does not look half as effective. And you've come to rely on them so much over the past few seasons that both of them not being available through injury, it's pretty dire for the Queensland Reds without them. But yeah, going back to the Waratahs, I thought Charlie Gamble was really good. One of the things that Dan McKellar highlighted in his press conference after the game was that when Charlie Gamble plays well, the Waratahs play well. And so that's one of the things that he is trying to get through to him. And we mentioned a little bit in the interview that's on Patreon available as well. So go make sure you subscribe and listen to that. But how does Charlie Gamble continue to sort of have these game-breaking performances throughout the season? And he outright, like in his own right, said that last season and the last few seasons, he knows that there are some games where he turns it on, that he shows up and he plays well. And there's other games where he kind of just cruises through and he hides a little bit and he just doesn't, he knows he can feel it in himself that the performance just isn't there. And this week it was pretty evident that when he plays well, this team did play well. And when you're going up against the incumbent Wallabies number 7, who is captaining the Reds and is that guy that has been given the nod from Les Kiss and Joe Schmidt in the past, like you want to have a performance like that. And Charlie Gamble delivered.
He plays up, doesn't he? Like if there's a team in which he gets dragged into the scrap, maybe it's a lower quality game, it stalls, he plays down. But you're right, he's seen McWright, he's gone, hey, I'm going to match this guy. It's just like the Lions last year. Like you were there at Allianz, he had an absolute stormer against the British and Irish touring team, and I think outpointed all their fetchers, the Jack Morgans, the Pollocks, the players involved in that game from a loose forward perspective. You've got to tip your hat to Clem Halaholo as well. On Super Rugby debut, he's someone that our mate John Ferguson over at Off the Ruck really rates highly, and he was so good. Big unit, a 6 that can cover lock at a pinch, and he was dominant from the carry. Nice early try, got them front foot ball, and they just kept rolling bigger and scarier blokes off the bench, and it kept going and going. It felt like the rock was rolling downhill and just kept picking up steam. So a great overall performance, and I've got a quick tip of the hat to Lawson Crichton too.
Yeah.
Really assured at 10, then shifted to 12 and created more opportunities outside for them. He's been a big pickup for them in the past 18 months.
Yeah, last year was a little bit hit and miss from Crichton, and I think that goes to show first of all, the experience that he's got, that he's now had 18 months-ish of being in this coaching setup in the environment, and he's now starting to emerge as a leader. And also giving that freedom to be able to play both 10 and 12. Like that's a pretty unique combination. I can't think of too many other Aussie Super Rugby players who are able to start a game at 10, shift to 12 and still perform like that. So really big props to him. And I think another one I'll just quickly shout out is Jack Debrasini. When he comes on in the second half, he was the one that actually started to implement that kicking game that just wasn't so evident in the first sort of 50, 60 minutes of the game. And so having him come on, and we know what we spoke about in the wrap-up of the preseason game, that he's got a boot on him like Reece Hodge, that he can clear his line and get 50-odd meters on it. But also having that ability to set up that try to Max Jorgensen, where he kicks across to not Pete Samu, to Charlie Gamble, who then comes inside. Like that's a really good combination to have for the Waratahs, and something that we haven't seen from them so much in the past. Having a 10 who's comfortable going to the boot. And that's exciting, actually, as a Waratahs fan, when you start to think of the weapons that we have on the wing, and then the player like Joseph Akuso Suaalii as well, that has in his time in rugby union been underutilized in the air. If we can start to unlock him a little bit more through kicking to him, that adds a whole nother facet to the game that the Waratahs haven't had in the lead up to this season. So really exciting there. There is a few players that I might just, I don't want to say a highlight that players didn't play that well, but just some, I guess, questions for Dan McKellar and the coaching team around selections for next week and moving forward that we might not see included. Probably a little bit hard to signal him out, but I wasn't too impressed with James Hendren at the back there for the Waratahs. There was a few times where I think he got caught out of position. And not that he was put under a heap of pressure by the Reds. Like, it wasn't a game where they targeted him particularly. But that try, particularly where, Tim Ryan finished it off, he kind of just, when the ball was loose, Hendren was just sort of jogging back. And as a fullback, that's where you need to put the jet shoes on, because that wasn't going to get covered by Gamble, and he needed to be there. And he was kind of out of position for that one. And there was a few other times where he was just too quick for the pass or threw an offload that wasn't on. He'll get better for it, but when you've got a player like Andrew Kellaway on the bench or not even making the 23, it'll be interesting to see what they do with that next week, whether Kellaway comes back in, comes onto the bench, or what we do with that. And another one, Folau Fainga'a, disappointing for him. Not saying he played badly, but just disappointing with that whole HIA incident. And I must admit, I have never seen that situation play out in a rugby game ever, where the matchday doctors cleared a player and the referee's going, no, he's off. No chance. Check him again. Get him off the field. And he's like, I'm fine. I didn't have a concussion. He's like, no, your eyes rolled back in your head. Get off the field. And then escorted him off the field.
Well, it was a strange one because it looked like he was completely out cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was down. Play stopped for that. So I think the referee's take from Paul Williams is probably, if it was significant enough that I have stopped the game, you need to get checked, because otherwise you've stopped the game for no reason when you're backpedaling and you've sucked momentum out of the Reds' attack. Now, at that point, I think it was still very much like Tahs are well in the clear. But that was a rare piece of front football for the Reds. So Paul Williams is thinking either you've been knocked out, you need to go off, or if this is gamesmanship, I want to double check and make sure that it's worth you getting checked because of the action that you've taken. I actually thought Paul Williams refereed fairly well.
That's not what the group. That's not what the group chat was saying, Lachie. That's
you
not what the group.
Come on, you ran out massive winners, and you had 17.
No, you were the one that was upset with him. I thought he was all right. Yeah, you weren't happy with him.
Well, he gave you 8 more penalties, so I guess play on.
Yeah, that's one area that we'll talk about. Actually, one thing that I just wanted to highlight for the Waratahs, I was really impressed with, and something that's been different this year in the lead up is their ability to, it's almost like, I want to call it like the Irish attack, where they've got multiple attack weapons or options at the line of attack. So they were often playing to a pod who then they either tipped on or they played it out the back of that pod, or the ball receiver just hit the line. And so every time that they went to the line from a defensive position, you weren't really sure what they were going to do with it. And that's something that Andy Farrell has implemented in the Irish system in the last few seasons, and they've done it really well. Now starting to see the Waratahs do that. It was working well for them this week. But I guess I'm a little bit hesitant because it looks easy to defend at times. Like the tip on was working this week against the Reds, but it would be very easy in future weeks. What was happening was that so they'd have a forward pod, they'd play to the front pod, so the middle player in a sort of a diamond formation, and then he would tip on to the outside man who'd get tackled and go to ground. But what was happening a lot of the time was that there was no defenders coming in and clearing that, or there was no attacking support players clearing that ruck. And so they played quickly, and the Reds, for some reason, just didn't adapt to that quick enough to be able to get a player like Fraser McWright to go for that outside one. But I could see a team in coming weeks, being able to just know that you just got to hit that ruck really quickly, because that was one area, particularly in that Brumbies trial game, where they were getting blown away at the breakdown, was because they were isolating themselves. And that was there this week still. It was an area that was ripe for picking, but the Queensland Reds just didn't adapt to it with the players they had on the field. And so if the Waratahs don't fix that up in coming weeks, I think the Hurricanes in 2 weeks' time could really use that as a way to get some momentum.
Yeah, massively. I think that came down to the Tahs earlier ruck pressure. Like, they had so much aggression when they're defending and were blowing past. I think the Reds probably thought, oh no, we're not winning this ruck battle. Let's not touch it. Let's get our defensive line set, and missed an opportunity there. But pretty comprehensive by all accounts. Is there anything else you want to add while you're on your Waratah soapbox? It's a good day for you.
No, I think one area that I was impressed with the Reds, just to give them something, their maul defense was really good. I thought there was a few times in the first half where the Waratahs went particularly to their maul from an attacking line out, and the Waratahs didn't go anywhere. Like, they just stayed still, and so hats off to the defensive effort from the Reds there, that their forward pack, muscled up and didn't allow them through. It was only when they started to play off that attacking weapon that they started to then build possession and build advantages that put themselves under pressure.
Yeah, I'm just going to under promise and over deliver now for the Reds. So I'm expecting no more wins for the rest of the season, and maybe things will turn around after I tipped them to finish first in the Aussie standings. Thank goodness we have a round 2 bye for Queensland fans. Now, Aussie derbies wise, we've also got the Brumbies and the Force. Now, Mitch Foster, we both got up and we said the Force have looked so good in pre-season. And they rolled out to HBF Park after watching their next-gen team get a nice win. Vibes are high, and they didn't look like they knew each other after 20 minutes had passed. It was a disastrous loss, I think you'd have to say, in the end.
This was a weird game, I must admit. And one of the things that the weather, I think, had a massive impact on this game. And so the opening 20 minutes, if you didn't catch the game, because it was being played in 35-degree conditions at kickoff, it meant that they had to have a few different weather, player welfare things introduced. So they had a water break at the 20-minute mark of each half. They had an extended halftime period. And the water breaks, I think, were the difference, to be honest, in this one. So at the kickoff, the Western Force were actually putting a heap of pressure on the Brumbies, and they spent most of that first 20 minutes in the Brumbies 22. They came away with 2 tries, I think, but they were also held up 2 or 3 times over the line as well. So they just needed to fix up their execution. But up until that first water break, the Brumbies didn't really look like they were in this game at all. They have a break. They have 3 minutes. They all sort of left the field, found some shade, had some water, had the coaches come onto the field and start actually coaching, which I thought was the interesting one. And from then on, the Western Force pretty much scored one more try in that game and didn't look like doing anything else. And the Brumbies just completely shifted on their head. And so out of the two things, and the Brumbies players actually spoke about it after the game, that they said that water break at the 20-minute mark, that's what we needed. We were flat opening the game, and we were able to come together, talk about what wasn't working, have a bit of water, have some oranges, and get back into it. It was really unusual to see that sort of thing in a professional rugby game.
Yeah, and flat's generous for the Brumbies. They were atrocious in the first 20. It's like we said there, the Force played so well, and then it was suddenly like they didn't know each other. So Ekuasi scores 6 minutes in, gets low, nice driving, sustained pressure. Ben Donaldson kicks that penalty just after the water break, but you were right, Carlo Tizzano got held up over the line. They were smashing on the door. And then a bit of a soft penalty after the drinks break, and the first real chance they get, it's Charlie Cale down the edge 3 phases after the line out. So Bobby V, who had a great game as well, I want to talk about Bobby in a bit, but they get quick go forward off the line out, 2-3 phases, sling it back to the left, and Charlie Cale in his return just goes, oh, I'll just beat 3 covering backs. You forgot how quick I was, and storms over. So it was pretty much one-way traffic from there. Like he was so good. The line out started to fail as well, which was a big point of victory for the Brumbies. And then Declan Meredith sort of off another sort of poor defensive read, I think you could say, before halftime. Like it looked like the Brumbies just committed too much to the ruck rather, and then bang bang bang, Declan Meredith goes, oh, I'm just going to run over the top of all these forwards. He skittles BPA, gets through the tackle of Tizzano and scores. And he's like his little dude. So that was a massive
Yeah, I think
try.
he's been watching what Valentini does in the preseason. He's like, that doesn't look too hard. I reckon I could do that. And away he goes. Scores a try
amazing.
in the opening
I would
round.
not have picked that. I would not have picked that at all in tight from Meredith, but it was what they needed. Cale steals a line out on halftime, so it's 14-10 at the break. And then like it was just one-way traffic after halftime, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think that we were pumping up the Force leading into this because on paper it looked like they had the stronger team with some of the players that were out of contention, out of selection. No Alan Alatoa, no Lenny Kitao, no Alessio. Like all of these big Brumbies names that you come to expect big performances and relying on in past seasons, and they're not there through injury or just non-selection. Through not being in the team at the moment overseas on sabbaticals or whatever. And they stood up, this Brumbies team. And it's kind of frustrating, isn't it, as non-Brumbies fans? As an Australian rugby fan, it's awesome that they continue to roll on and to just bring out these players who are just top-notch But as Australian, as other Super Rugby fans, it's like far out. This was the year that I was actually hoping the Brumbies weren't that good so that someone else like the Tahs or the Reds could catch them. But they put 56 points on a pretty good-looking Force team and completely shut them out of the game like you highlighted there. I think on reflection, in the preseason, we were talking about how this Force team had been pulled together and they'd been choosing players who had experience overseas, and they'd come together, and they've got Argentinian players, they've got former All Blacks, Curly Bill's there, former 50, 60 cap Wallaby, all these guys who have experience, but very little game time together. And that was their undoing. Once the pressure started to build on from the Brumbies, this Western Force team just fell to pieces, and no one stood up. Like, it was pretty evident that once Nick Champion de Crepney went off with his HIA, they didn't have anyone who was really being able to turn the team around and to get that forward pack back on task. And the Brumbies just outmuscled them in all facets.
That's an awesome point. I think you're bang on with Crep going off, because he's their vice captain, he's their defensive captain as well. It's something we spoke about with him over on Extra Time too. Like, what is that role? And it's basically making sure that at all times our line is intact. We're working up, putting pressure. They were so passive after he went off, and they found ways to kind of stay in the game. They had that great sort of runaway try down the right edge, Donna kicking back inside for Franco Molina to give it a bit of a spark, but that was really the against the grain. It wasn't what was regularly happening.
That was pretty emblematic of their performance, wasn't it? Like, they looked like a Barbarians team, and that try was a Barbarians try. Like, Donaldson makes the break and he kicks it through for the second rower. Like, in what attacking structure are you setting that up? That's just two guys who just have fluke situations. Whereas the Brumbies were building attack phases, had built pressure, and then were relying on their players like Charlie Cale to make a line break and finish things off. It was unfortunately, it was really disappointing performance from the Western Force.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. The biggest point for me, right? So after the Molina try, somehow, even though the Brumbies are looking really solid after halftime, it's 28-17, so still very much in the balance. They're around the 60-minute mark, and the Force pile into this ruck. So they put, I think, 6 or 7 blokes all into this ruck to try and turn it over. They're surging forward. The ball is retained by the Brumbies, and suddenly they have a 4-on-2 on the left edge, and Ollie Sapsford just strolls into open space, feeds it back inside to Meredith, and you could feel the crowd noise just drop.
Yeah,
you could have heard a pin fall in there. It was incredible, and that's fresh off the Molina try. So they go bang, bang. Suddenly it's 35-17. The game's out of reach, and the pain that the Brumbies piled on late. It's not just the fact that they were scoring these tries. It's bonus point stuff too. It's points difference, and they go top of the table off the back of who scores late. Corey Toole scores late. Charlie Cale scores late. Ollie Sapsford in overtime. Like, it just became a rout. And it looked like the Force had kind of tossed in the towel after Corey Toole went over.
And it's really weird because the Western Force have been training in their preseason in these conditions. And out of the two, it looked like they were the ones that were impacted more by the hot conditions than the Brumbies. And the Brumbies, they come from Canberra. Like, talk about, yes, it gets hot down there, but it doesn't get 38-degree consistent summer preseasons that the Western Force are used to. And so when you start to look at the tries that they conceded late, like that try to Charlie Cale, his second one at the end
Quick
there,
tap.
like, that's just, teams just aren't for some reason adjusting to the new quick tap law. The Waratahs also scored or set up one of their tries from a quick tap like that, where Jake Gordon went quickly and ran through and set up someone out wide. But that was just not professional rugby standard. You can't just stand there in that area and just not expect a player to do that and then to run through untouched. Like, yeah, it was I'm sure it was actually really telling looking at the I think it was that try, or maybe it was the Sapsford one right at the end when they shot to the press box and Simon Cron just takes his hat off and just throws it, and then you can see him mouthing a few things to his coaching
choice
stuff.
4-letter words, I reckon.
Yes.
Scrabble master.
And you can tell that it's not going to be a happy Monday. I'm glad I'm not a Western Force player, because they're going to get absolutely drilled this week. And it doesn't get any easier for them. They got the Blues coming to town, who are coming off a last point loss to the Chiefs.
They're going to be absolutely steaming. It's going to be such a brutal Monday review session. Roll out the telly on the trolley, put the VCR on, and just suffer through the last 10 minutes in particular. What can we take away from this outside of the fact that we were so spectacularly wrong? Trial form has betrayed us here. Remember, not 2 weeks ago, right? The Force absolutely pumped them. They put, I think, 42-12 over at Scots College in Perth. And this Brumbies team, maybe they were keeping all their cards close to their chest, but they've hoodwinked us, and without all the stars. And we haven't even talked about the fact that Tom Hooper and Tom Wright aren't there either. You mentioned the big guns, and those are some more big ones, plus a few more to come in as well. Like they looked so good, and it sets them up beautifully, right? They're coming off a big win. They topped the table. It's the Brumbies and the Tahs 1 and 2. Great time to be around New South Wales ACT rugby. It's the dream start for the Ponies.
It's a good time to be an Australian rugby fan. We should just pause the table there for a few more rounds and come
Stop
back
the count
in July. And I think the best part about all of this is the team that's coming last is the Reds.
Really? I thought the Force.
Well, they were last time I checked. They might be. I think the Force might be below them because they've got a worse differential. But yeah, they're down there. Good. Cellar dwellers.
That's right. Plenty of stuff to get over soon. I mean, I'm so glad they got a bye too. But you're right. The Force having the Blues come across is going to be tough. I'm pretty sure that's played out at Joondalup as well. So they're taking a game to sort of suburbs, WA suburbs, which is going to be exciting. Lots of work for the Force to do. They had some serious issues around their lineout. Like BPA missed a couple of crucial throws in and around halftime. Physicality went down, and they just faded late. So I'm not sure where they go to. Luckily, we're not the ones making those decisions. Anything else out of this game that you want to point to?
No, I think we can move on, and just looking at the time, we're probably close to wrapping things up. We will be back in our extra time preview pod, or our extra time pod offering this week, doing our tips for round 2 once we've got sort of team lists announced, and we'll be able to sort of dive into those ones a little bit more. Lachie doesn't have to talk about his Reds, so he'll be happy about that. But yeah, is there anything else that's sort of happened in the world of rugby that we need to touch on before we finish things up?
Oh, just whispers, just little whispers we're hearing across the ditch, Mitch Foster. There's a couple of birds that tweet and Twitter in our ear sometimes, and there's some good heat around the All Blacks coach announcement coming this week. So this will drop on Sunday on Extra Time, Monday for the regular listeners, and it sounds like the deal is pretty much set in stone for who leads New Zealand in 2026.
Yeah, so what we're hearing is, are we going to announce who it is?
I'm not sure we can unveil, but it's down to 2, right?
For New Zealand rugby.
It's Jamie Joseph and Dave Rennie, isn't it?
That's right. And so it sounds like what we're hearing out of New Zealand rugby is that announcement will be coming sometime next week. So we will have a announcement coming. And if I was New Zealand rugby, the way that I think it's going to go with Jamie Joseph, this would be the perfect time to announce it after he just knocks off the Crusaders in the opening round as the coach of the Highlanders. So, it's an interesting time.
It's very exciting. I got to admit that the prospect of a red hot Jamie Joseph bringing all that energy kind of spooks me out a little bit. But Dave Rennie's doing some good stuff with Kobe Steelers as well. It very much seems like it's down to a 2-horse race. I'm not sure if there would be a job share if Rennie would do an assistant role. It seems like he's a bit too senior for that. But people are speculating, hypothesising. We're not going to dump too much more into it. But it is certainly interesting to see what our main rivals are up to across the ditch. I guess a bit of Six Nations too as well. It's very, very up in the air at time of recording. France haven't yet played Wales, but I imagine they're probably going to beat the hell out of them. I had to stop myself there from how I really feel. Scotland turning around after losing to Italy in the first round. They have pumped England to retain the Calcutta Cup, and Italy putting a massive scare on over Ireland. Eventually the Irish coming out 20-15 victors. But basically at this stage, it's France's Six Nations to lose, Mitch.
Yeah, it's a really some big results coming out overnight, and Italy, the form sort of team in the Six Nations at the moment. They've win last week, gone close this week against Ireland. That try that Lewis Liner scored I don't remember what the minute was, in the second half that got chalked off the board. I thought it was sort of a bit touch and go, backwards out of the hands. But big shout out to Holly Davidson as well, the first female referee to adjudicate a men's Six Nations game. So well done to her. She did a great performance and handled that game really well. But yeah, I just sit there watching that game thinking how good it would be to see Lewis Liner teaming up with Tom Liner and playing for the Wallabies at some point in the future. That'd be... he's such a good player, isn't he?
Oh, he's unbelievable. I think he's very much lost to the Azuri. We did see the third liner brother, Nicola Liner. He's been playing a bit of next gen sevens for next gen Super Rugby rather for Queensland. So had a crack last week, and I'm pretty sure he's playing today at Ballymore as well. So at least we got 2 from 3. That's not too bad.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Wow,
but it keeps the door open in a few years. Maybe he comes back and changes allegiances. One last thing, just going back a step to the whispers that we've heard. From an Australian perspective, some of the things that are coming out that we thought that, and it had been officially announced that at the end of Joe Schmidt's time as Wallabies coach, that he'd be, hard contract end, that he'd walk away and go and do his own thing post and retire, play some golf, that type of thing. But there are whispers coming out of RA that he might actually stick around in some capacity, and he might be back in 2027 in some consulting type capacity, helping Les Kiss and the Wallabies as they head into a home World Cup. Lachie, as an Aussie rugby fan, that must excite you, right? To have Les Kiss and Joe Schmidt both handling the Wallabies together.
Well, it's not quite dream team, but it's pretty damn good, right? Like, we know that Les Kiss is a relatively experienced coach at rep level, sort of playing top flight footy, but no international experience, aside from his assistance roles with Ireland. And who was the man that he worked with? It was Joe Schmidt. So they're a good tag team duo. When Les Kiss is taking on his first head coach role at international level, I think having a familiar face, someone who's worked with, got silverware with across that very successful period for Ireland, a couple of Grand Slams, I think we need it. And clearly, Les Kiss is not the finished product. I don't think anyone expected him to be, but performances from the Reds across the last 2 years and certainly early this year show that there is still a lot of work to be done. So I think everyone will be breathing a sigh of relief. I've heard those whispers too out of RA, and they're very confident of having Schmitty on as a bit of a guru role. I think sort of like Wayne Smith styles over in New Zealand, just a mentor, someone who's been there, done that, and to facilitate that shift across and keep the continuity. I can't think of a better person, and certainly keeping him out of an All Blacks coaching polo is my main objective. So as long as we achieve that for the World Cup, then good.
No, Daddy just wants the Castor polo shirt and tracky set. So
I tried to stop my face from just contorting that it did. It's so blue. It feels like I'm wearing like a 2015 Argentina polo. Not quite sold on them yet. But tell you what, those Tahs heritage and those Brumbies heritage jerseys worked wonders. They were very schmick.
What is the go with Queensland rugby not doing heritage? Like, I don't think they've ever worn a heritage jersey.
Oh, they shifted back to, we're getting to real nuffy territory, so turn off now if jersey chat's not your thing. They swapped back Brad Thorne and Nick Stiles. I'm pretty sure brought back the maroon kit from
but that was like
red as a heritage thing. So I think they don't really do heritage jerseys. Maybe.
No, we're too above that in Queensland.
I want them to bring back the candy stripe. Like that was beautiful. The maroon, navy, and white. But I don't know. I think you're right. We started copying the Lions jersey, and now it's not working for us. We'll have to see how we go.
Get a collar on it. Come on, you can't be the only Aussie rugby side without a collar. There's only 4 teams. The New Balance one
a collar? I was not sold on that one either.
Yeah, it's got a collar on the back.
I reckon the Tahs and the Brumbies keep those heritage kits. They look so good. The fact that the Brumbies pulled out a 2001 like Brumby Runners jersey and were like, nah, this is heritage. I love it. I thought it looked great.
Yeah, it did look really good, and Tane Edmed like blended in perfectly with the orange across the across the chest as well. So made him feel right at home.
It was beautiful. Are there any other business items to round out an episode, Mitch, or can we go back to celebrating guitars?
Yeah, we should probably go hit the Bob Templeton cups just in the back here, waiting to have another beer out of it. So I'll get back to that and continue to gloat over the victory that was the Waratahs taking it home against the Reds with a bonus point win. What else do you need?
Oh, it's deserving. So Brumbies and Tahs on top the Super Rugby ladder after round 1. It's been an excellent wrap. Thanks again for your company, Mitch Foster. And thank you to listening on at home. Make sure you jump over onto Patreon. Get the extra chats that Mitch has had with Charlie Gamble and with Miles Amadocero. That's exclusive stuff. And of course, the press conference there for all the ad-free access you can get behind the scenes support independent rugby in Australia.
All right, we'll see you on Wednesday for our extra time coverage. See you then. Bye.